Urbania, for me, it's a process of negotiation, often, of how much the individual brings into it, how much the group ethos or the group values are important. For example, in writing the press release, how do you negotiate one writing it and the other people sort of having to identify with it as well, things like that. It's quite interesting to me, especially sort of with the current situation, sort of in terms of credit crunch, and you have these sort of thoughts again coming up about how much you give to the individual, which is sort of like in capitalism, everything is about the individual, and then about sort of more socialist idea where the group becomes more dominant and more important, and how that is actually negotiated. And for me, what has come out so far is also that it's questionable whether you can actually fix that, whether that's not something that is fluid, and at some point the individual will be more important at points of personal crises or something, and at other points the group becomes more important, and that is a sort of interesting negotiation and process to me. I quite liked the way it came into being, as far as I remember. Maybe that's sort of my own mythology-making process happening here, but as far as I remember, because we're quite different people and we were looking for mechanisms to bind us together in a way, kind of tribal feathers, that kind of thing. And so the idea about boiler suits came up, and then Maki turned up with the red ones, and it sort of fitted with the idea of building the bricks. And I like that, the way it was kind of quite random in a way it happened, but also quite poignant in the way it was relevant in terms of utopian ideas. But in talking to people here at the Royal Academy at the installation, it sort of quite a lot of other sort of associations came up. We had a lady who just came out of a 12-year period of staying in a Buddhist monastery, funnily enough, in the Lake District. And so her association is very much this particular that we have here, sort of with a Buddhist and sort of spiritual side of things. Then another guy, a gentleman, came up, and for him it was much about sort of cults, and I also thought that was quite interesting, because cult is a community, and quite a strong community. So I thought that was quite interesting. But mainly that kind of combination of randomness and sort of significance. I'm not sure whether that's really such a desirable state, because it seems so terminable. It's an end product of a time of development, and then it ends in this utopian idea, and to me from then there is either the decline or no development at all, which is pretty much like death. So I'm feeling a bit ambivalent. I mean, the general idea of it being kind of a nice community and everybody's happy is kind of obviously quite appealing. And there's this sort of this other side, which I think makes the concept of utopia quite a sort of Western culture specific idea, I think. Sort of coming out of a quite, sort of Christian tradition, where you're saved by some idea or some person, this or the other, and then sort of paradise ensues at some point. So I don't know whether sort of other cultures with completely different sets of ideas and worldviews will really understand or just have that idea. What appeals to me about this sort of conjuncture of randomness and significance, that sort of exploration of that, where you give into randomness, where you give into control or into points making and that sort of things. But also specifically in Urbania, also how you make what is my individual practice kind of of working with sound and sort of spatial sensibilities, how you actually make that into a group-wide, how I relinquish sort of my control on that and let other people influence what I do. And so, for example, I found myself really loving how the more practical people do things, and I've made these sort of instruments which I wouldn't have thought of before. I mean, it's questionable how they sort of work as instruments by themselves or sound objects, but I really am quite chuffed about kind of just making them, and it's been wonderful.